talk about the Aer Lingus Classic in Dublin, Ireland. Georgia Tech, Florida State. Florida State, at the time I made this, was 11.5-point favorite. I believe it's 13.5 now, or 12.5.
Oh,
I saw
it's
10.
10. It is 10. It's coming down.
13.5.
10
See,
and a
it's
half.
Sports Illustrated a little bit ago. But all right, it's coming down. Georgia Tech in the mix here. Can Brent Key's squad get it done? JP, what do you think?
Yeah, this is actually more of an interesting matchup as I get closer to the game, not just because it's going to be the game number one of the weekend and of the season, but I do think there are some spots here that I just really want to know about Florida State and what can Georgia Tech really do to change things up. First thing I wrote down now is how conservative or run heavy is the new Florida State offense with DJU running the thing, right? Or we're not going to be as downfield of a passing team like they were a season ago, mostly because the receivers aren't the same group that were elite a season ago. And DJU is not the passer that Jordan Travis was a season ago. And so how does that completely change? Do they become more conservative? Are they very run heavy? Is it a lot of play action baked just to make sure that he feels comfortable? Because I can't imagine they're asking him to air it out. And then how much better does this Georgia Tech defensive unit get with the hire of Santucci? Like, what if it fits? What if the mold fits and they are just better off the rip? And we usually see in week 0 games and ones that are kind of close, the offenses usually have a little bit of an advantage. I feel like if you haven't seen teams like this, and then you're completely this is the first time you've seen a team with a different level of speed than what you see every day in practice. Like going back to like Nebraska and Northwestern, like those two teams weren't very good offensively throughout the year. They were way better defensive programs, and they lit up the scoreboard in Ireland. And I'm just looking at Georgia Tech here, and I'm thinking that I think there's an opportunity here to slow things down, stay in it, with just Florida State not being as explosive as you might think or had seen in years past. Along with that, I think Georgia Tech's offensive line is probably in a pretty good spot to deal with that front four from Florida State. And I think Florida State's good on the front four, but I think Georgia Tech loves their offensive line and what they've built there. And if Haynes King can just not turn it over a ton like he did a season ago and still be that guy putting up numbers in yardage and pass or in touchdowns, like they could stay in this thing the whole time. Like, that's why I'm like, I think that's what people are seeing, what the numbers coming down, but I'm not saying that this is going to be super close all the time, but I'm not thinking we're not going to show up this thing be 35-17 in the third quarter. I don't see that.
All right. Yeah, I like that take. A little Brent Key love, a little Yellow Jacket love. Jake, what do you got on this game?
Yeah, I've said that I'm on the under for wins for Georgia Tech this year, but I'm high on them going into this game for a few reasons. Number one, outside of last year's Notre Dame Navy game, I think every other game in Ireland has been under 10 points in the final score. I think it's going to be close. What I like is JP made a great point. It's like, I think it's harder to get the defense ready to go for week 0 when you, especially in the new portal era, when you have no idea maybe what you're getting. Although if you're scouting Georgia Tech, you're getting a lot of their studs back. So maybe you do know what to look for if you're Florida State scouting this football team. But that's kind of where I'm going with this is, can Georgia Tech punch first? They have the weapons to do it. I like Leary at wide receiver, the Haynes kid at running back. And obviously everybody knows about Haynes King. So looking at this roster, offensive line, I think brings back 4 starters. Yes, you're going against Marvin Jones Jr. and Patrick Payton at the defensive ends for Florida State, who are going to be really good. But maybe it takes a quarter or two if you're taking the Georgia Tech spread. Maybe it takes a quarter or two. They get out to a 10-0 lead, something like that. Florida State will probably find their groove. They're very talented. They're going to be a really good team this year, and they bounce back. But if you're looking at a big spread here, if you're looking to take Florida State, which I don't know yet, I don't know what I'm doing, I just would be cautious about it because I do think this is going to be a close game. And I would love to see fireworks first game of the year. I'd love to see this be high scoring. But if you're Georgia Tech, make the first punch, get out to that first touchdown, first drive, or whatever that looks like.
I think that's super important too. Reese, what do you got on the Aer Lingus Classic?
I think both these guys hit on the head when you talk about, what's this offense going to be like with DJU, because he's not Jordan Travis. You don't have Keon Coleman. You don't have Johnny Wilson. You don't have Trey Benson. So that defense is going to look a lot different. And you talk about maybe it is going to take him a quarter to figure out. And it's also that defense, like Haynes Keen, I think we could talk about, is probably one of the more underappreciated, undervalued dual threat quarterbacks in college football. Like, the dude's a baller. And like this offense last year, they were very balanced. They were 425 yards a game. They gave up they rushed for 204 on the ground, which is pretty solid. And you passed for 221 in the air. So if Florida State's offense is struggling, their defense better be shared up too, because this offense is going to be pretty solid. Because you guys just talk about their offensive line too. I mean, Brent Key was the old line coach at Alabama, so he's got these guys shared up. And according to Phil Steele, it's one of the top lines in the ACC, and it's a Joe Moore Award contender. Right. So I think this offensive line, I think, is going to be a huge boost for this team, because you just listed the guys on Florida State's D line. They're going to be an issue for him. But I mean, go ahead, JP.
Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off. I said, did we mention the defensive secondary for Florida State, like, and how good that group's supposed to be? We're talking about Haynes King, and I agree, Reese, like, he could light you up if you're not paying attention to it. Do we have multiple guys that can attack this defensive secondary? I mean, I'm thinking Eric Singleton's the only guy that's a real downfield threat that can really light up any secondary in the country. But I feel like they need multiple options here if you're Georgia Tech to get the pass game rolling.
I feel like fair.
It's a fair point.
Sure. Yeah. Reese, anything else on this game?
No, that's pretty much all I had. I think with it being a road game too, like in Ireland, it's so weird these teams are going to Ireland. But I think that definitely helps out Georgia Tech too. I think with the spread being double digits, like I think Shaver just said it too. I'm
saying just make it weird if you're them. Just make it weird.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like you're not high on this team's over for wins, but they're going to make it a hard-nosed football game, especially with the head coach you have. I just think it's hard to say that it's going to be a double-digit spread with what it is right now. I kind of like Georgia Tech in this spot, I think.
We covered a lot of the bases already, but let me just point out to the viewers that Georgia Tech, and when I saw them, this was an hour ago, plus 340 on the money line. I'm just throwing that out there. Let it sit in your brain a little bit, maybe marinate it, and then it wouldn't be the worst player thing to cheer for on a Saturday in week 0. But let's talk about this team. Haynes King, we talked about him a bunch. He can sling it. You're both correct, JP, Reese. However, he oftentimes slings the ball to the wrong team. It is very important for him to not turn the ball over in this game. I think that's going to be the name of the game for Georgia Tech. If you want to stay competitive in this game, keep it close. Don't turn the ball over. He threw 35 touchdowns last year. Great. He's probably going to even air it out more with another year of experience under his belt. But when you throw 16 picks, something's got to change, because you're due for 1 or 2 this game, and you got an elite secondary, which JP mentioned, that you're going up against. So that is going to be the name of the game. If they compete deep in this game, you've got to control the clock. Find the run game against a good defensive front and make it that slow, elongated, weird game, just like JP said. But I think they can do it. I'll start off with our score predictions and who's going to win the game. I think Florida State wins the game 34-24. When I saw it, it was 11. So I think Georgia Tech still covers, but Florida State's just too talented and too well coached to lose that game. JP, we'll go JP first. He's wearing the Tech shirt.
Yeah, sorry. I was looking to see if I could find a Haynes King prop and just wanted to see what his passing numbers were and if he had an interception prop and if it was over 0.5 or over 1.5. That was just, I feel like,
gotta be over.
I think he's good for 1. Yeah. This one, like I said, I think it'll be a lot closer. I think it'll be, if Georgia Tech doesn't turn it over, it really can stay low scoring. If they start turning it over, this could just become a shootout. Like, if they're not turning it over, they're scoring. And if Florida State's getting the ball back from Georgia Tech that consistently, this can get up there. I'm going to say he throws 1, but I'm going to go with, what's this over under at? Do we know the answer to that question?
56, I believe.
Yeah, 55.5. Okay.
I got, give me a 31-28 Florida State win. Like, I think it just gets dicey week 0. Well, this will be one we forget about as the road goes. The Florida State continues to get better and better, but I think it's one we'll look back at for Georgia Tech, be like, hey, they were in this week 0. I think this team came going in the right direction.
Yep, and that's what Brent Key does. That dude makes games against ranked opponents tight. That's what he's done since he's been the head coach there, and even as an assistant, he was a valuable member there. Jake, what do you got on this game? Final score prediction, who wins it?
This game could go like 10 different ways. I mean, you have a lot of unfamiliarity with Florida State's offense going up against what we think is a bad defense in Georgia Tech. On the other side, you have a pretty solid, fast, up-tempo Georgia Tech offense going against a really good Florida State defense. Like, it's just a battle of the opposites here. I don't know what I'll be playing. I will play it because this game's the best of the weekend. But right now, I'm taking Florida State 31, Georgia Tech 20. I think that it'll be close in the 4th. And I do see Haynes King throwing at least 1 pick. And it's probably going to come at a bad time for them.
Yep, that would add up. Reese, close us out on week 0 previews. Who wins it and what's the score?
I don't know if you guys remember last year, but I did take a shot in the dark on a 13.5-point spread, Duke and Clemson.
It's true.
I believe it was a week 1 football game. And it did hit,
was.
but I'm not going to do that this year.
Wait.
I think
We need
What?
to mention that was after he picked Clemson to go to the playoffs.
Yeah, I did
and
do
then-
that. Whatever. I did do that. Whatever. It happened. But hey, 1 for 1 in that situation. Whatever. But I'm not going to do that this year. I think Georgia Tech is still going to cover the number, but let's go 28-24. I think it's going to be a closer ball game. I think they're going to make it ugly, and you are going to get your interception out of King, but hopefully he does it early when Florida State is still struggling to figure that offense out. I think do it in the first half. Just don't have one late at the end of the game. And I think this is I'm not saying I wouldn't be extremely shocked if Georgia Tech would win this football game, but I think if they do, it's going to be because it's an ugly football game.